Good evening and welcome to the evening's forum. For the past several years, the Tuesday evening forum at Nobel has been focused on topics that are related to the theme, but that also have a particular local interest. This year, the committee conceived the idea of a panel devoted to the topic of building a food-secure Minnesota, proposals from the front. Mike Ham, a Michigan State University colleague, actually, of Paul Thompson, and a leading voice in the food security movement, defines food security as, quote, a condition in which all community residents obtain a safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate diet through a sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice. We've asked our speakers tonight to offer, from their locations in our food system, some proposals for a food-secure future. We invited them to take into account some of the other players in the food system and to think creatively about how we will move toward the food-secure future that they envision. How will we work together to ensure access to safe, affordable, delicious, culturally appropriate food for all the residents of our state? What do we need to do as producers, as consumers, and as food citizens to ensure this future? Each speaker will have about 10 to 12 minutes in which to explain the universe and give 3 examples. It's an impossible task, but that's what we do here. And to offer their proposals to us. And when all the speakers have been heard from, we'll have a brief time to discuss together, and there's a microphone right over there at that time. First this evening is Mitch Davis. Mitch is the Vice President for Research and Development at Cisco. Guess where the name comes from? Cisco International, which is based right here in South Central Minnesota. Cisco is a family-owned international cheese and food ingredient company that's headquartered in Le Sueur. It was founded in 1943. Among its products are cheese, one of the largest suppliers to the Kraft Food Corporation, and also whey protein isolates, which are found in a host of consumer products ranging from yogurt to candy. Quote, 3 generations of confident, risk-taking expansion have made us a leader in the dairy industry. We are a company committed to technical advancement, customer service, and superior quality. Mitch.
Being a lifelong resident of St. Peter and beneficiary of Gustavus and the infrastructure this college brings, I'd like to thank the college and the Nobel Committee for having this for so many years. Our company has sponsored it for, I think, close to 10 years. It's not just because of the food aspect. And I just think we're all blessed to have a conference like this exist in this town. So my hats off to them. And thank you, Lisa, for the nice introduction. Cisco Foods, I'm going to run through our background so you can get a feel for how we play in the food industry. Building a food-secure Minnesota, proposals from the front. I think Minnesota is quite insulated from any food insecurity issues, and I'd say that relative to other parts of the world, and I'll expand on that as we go here. We are a family business. I'm part of the 3rd generation, the one that screws it up, breaks the business. My grandfather, who we're all very proud of, is 91 years old, started the company, founded the company, and he's still very active, and it's very nice to have him to go to. I have 3 siblings in my family that participate in the business, and my sister also is a shareholder. Privately held since '43. Last year we did about $700 million in sales. A little bit you should know there is about 85% of our sales dollar goes to buying the milk. We're very intense on raw material costs in our industry. We're headquartered in Le Sueur. We have R&D and quality control there. The sales office and application center is in Eden Prairie. We have sales office and employees in Geneva, Shanghai. And our processing facilities are in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Idaho. We process in all 3 plants about 11 million pounds of milk a day. We purchase milk from producers, about 60 in Idaho and about 90 in Minnesota. And we manufacture American and Italian-style cheeses for end users such as Sargento, Land O'Lakes, Kraft. We produce about 1 million pounds of cheese in those 3 factories a day, and they go into 40-pound blocks, 640-pound blocks, and 500-pound drums. We also make shredded cheese in our Idaho plant and some Italian pizza loaves in South Dakota. Our markets are largely institutional, and they're large national cheese converters. We're not an end product producer as far as cheese goes. We do have a niche in the industry that is unique to us. We make ion exchange whey protein isolate, which allows for high purity, and we can make a multitude of bioactives that are isolated from whey, and we break down those proteins into individual proteins, take advantage of their nutrition and their bioactivity. We are the technical leader in ion exchange as far as whey proteins, and the reason is our scale. The science is well known. Ion exchange is widely used and very simple by now, but the scale that we do it and the conditions and the sanitation that we employ are unique to us. We have an international presence, and that's why the Minnesota local food supply security is something that's on our radar, but it's taken probably for granted by us. And we're in places where food is not taken for granted with our sales. Our plants are located in Jerome, Idaho, Lake Norden, South Dakota. We have a plant in Nicollet, Minnesota, which is a spray drying plant. Le Sueur, we have 2 plants, an ingredient plant and a cheese plant. Just a couple visuals, I'll click through these quickly. This is our Idaho plant in Jerome. It's a very large plant. It's our largest plant. We've had it since '92. This is the complex in Le Sueur, where we process cheese, proteins, and lactose. We also do custom spray drying for non-dairy food ingredients such as starch, soy sauce, etc. And this is our ingredient side in Le Sueur. This is our Lake Norden, South Dakota plant, where we make mozzarella and provolone cheese and lactose for the infant formula industry, and also whey protein concentrate. We also have 2 dairy farms west of St. Peter here. We open them up to tours at least once a year. I hope any of you that can take advantage of that opportunity would come and see what we do. We're very proud of what we do. We operate the 2 dairies synergistically. One of them is a calving center and special needs center, and the other one's a milking center. Together, we milk 6,200 cows 3 times a day. We have 85 employees between the 2 dairies, and we ship about 350,000 pounds of milk each day. That allows us to produce about a truckload of cheese at Le Sueur each day from those 2 dairies, which is about 18% of the raw material that flows into that plant. We also provide fertilizer in the form of anaerobically digested manure for about 4,000 farm acres, which saves about $100 an acre in input costs to those farmers that receive it versus buying synthetically produced petrochemical fertilizer. Back up. This is our New Sweden complex. It also has an academic center. University of Minnesota School of Veterinary Medicine trains all their large animal vets on our site. We have room for 24 students overnight in our dormitory. They do their rotations as an immersion, much like a doctor would do a residency. And so our dairy is large enough that enough events that are of concern to veterinarians are encouraged so they can actually see those and be trained on those experiences, C-sections, DA surgeries, etc. Our Northern Plains site has an anaerobic digester. We produce about 6,500 kilowatts a day of renewable energy, which we displace conventional electricity with, and we milk about 3,000 cows here. Now, back to the theme, building a food-secure Minnesota. Proposals from the front. We don't, and haven't for some time, operated on a Minnesota basis. We're an international company. Our product goes everywhere. Our cheese is mostly domestic, although it is international on occasion, and our whey ingredients are largely international. We think in the terms of the world and have for about 15 years, probably 20 years. First thing that our company thinks of every morning when we get up, safe food. We spoke earlier, one of the speakers, about HACCP. Key to our process, even if it's not HACCP per se, we have many customers who drive our quality systems and inspect and verify our quality systems. Very important, safe food. Nobody our size can afford to have a hiccup and have a pathogen get out and kill somebody. Affordable food. Constantly from our customers, it's taken for granted we're going to have safe, high-quality food. It's also taken for granted we're going to be competitive. Our economy of scale is important to us. We have to produce a lot of units because our margin isn't very big. Nutritious food. My degree's in nutrition, my wife's degree's in nutrition. We're about nutrition. We have access and process one of the most wholesome foods in nature, milk. And what we do every day is try to preserve that milk, nurture that milk so that we don't destroy any of the nutrition that was produced by that cow. and deliver that to the consumer without impeding the functionality, flavor, or safety of that food. Good tasting food. We all like a good experience when we eat. There are people in parts of the world that don't have that luxury. We do in this room, I believe. Like I say, in some parts of the world, they're just happy to get a carbohydrate, protein, and fat that day. Variety of food choices centered around things like health conditions. We see a lot of gluten-free requests now for celiac disease. You've got the cultural and religious preferences, the people with diabetes that have to consider their sugar intake. Also convenient food. We expect to be able to make it easily. We expect not to have a lot of waste, so serving size is important, especially to people that live alone, etc. We're afforded all those in this area. Our mission at Cisco is to provide the highest quality products, priced competitively with flawless service, and employees with a workplace that provides fulfilling and rewarding jobs. And the communities we are located in with a responsible, successful, and sustainable member. That's necessary for social license, it's necessary for economic reasons, carry the burden of utilities in the cities we operate, etc. And it's also necessary from an environmental perspective. Nobody benefits from screwing up the environment. Our cows need water, us and our kids drink the water, we live near these facilities. We definitely benefit from doing the right thing environmentally. And economically, it behooves you to do it because there's money to be made from doing it correctly. So, food security. And it was quoted in the material I was given, a condition in which all community residents obtain a safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate diet through sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice. I think it has a few gaps here. I don't think you obtain food. I think these days you purchase it. And I don't care if you grow your own garden or what you do. You spend money, you spend time, you spend resources to get food. It's not as bad as in the cave days when they spent the whole day looking for food and they were successful if they had it by the end of the day, and then they could sleep till next day. But I think we are blessed in this country. I've been in Cairo, Egypt. I've been in Southeast Asia. I've been in Eastern Europe. Not everybody has what we have, and choice is a good thing. And I think what we're talking about here today with all of the choices we have, organic, natural, locally grown, fantastic options. Sometimes affordable by some and not by all. But in our business, the market we serve, those luxuries aren't a given. So there are parts of the world that that's not available. I think if it worked, great, fantastic. And I think choice in food and choice in nutrition and education is fantastic. I believe food companies will sell what they can make a profit at. I think the consumer ends up driving the products that are produced by food companies, and they do it with their wallet. And I think today's material was excellent. And I think consumers have a long way to go as far as knowing what they're putting in their body and what the ramifications of that are. And I think the food industry doesn't always do a good job of trying to facilitate that. We do. I think we're blessed with a great raw material and a very wholesome, nutritious product. We're out to promote that nutrition. Science and technology will continue to shape the products and practices that are employed in food production. We will have to feed more people with less natural resources than ever before, and food choices are a luxury of a wealthy society. And unless you've traveled internationally, you cannot appreciate that. Some consumers will eat what's available, frankly. And just quickly, I think food security is very important in the state of the world. I think hungry, desperate cultures will continue to contribute to unrest that occurs in the world for various reasons. Poor people who don't have anything to eat tend to do other things. I think providing the world with safe food is in all of our best interests, and the U.S., frankly, should be the leader. We have the best technology and the best ability to produce that food. And it's in the best interest of us to have a safe, nutritious, affordable food supply available to all human beings on this earth. This can only be achieved by using appropriate technology, in my opinion. And to speak to that, I want to beg your time. It's a silent PowerPoint that I want to show. I think it's very compelling. And I think if we can do it in the quiet so everyone can read it, just think about it, process it, I appreciate it. Thanks, Lisa, for the patience.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Mitch. Our next speaker is also from Le Sueur, Minnesota. Tom Nussmeier was a classmate of mine at Mitch Davis back in '03. He is a farmer at Pig in the Patch Pork in Le Sueur. The Nussmeier farm has been in the family for 5 generations. I believe Tom is in the 4th generation. Is that true, Tom? Fifth. Oh, you're in the 5th.
I think so.
In 1975, it was declared a Minnesota heritage farm, century heritage farm. Their vision is to produce locally produced wholesome food to improve the health of our citizenry while supporting our community's economic and physical environment. They say, we at the Nussmeier farm are dedicated to the craft of farming. We emphasize careful and humane husbandry. Our animals are hand-fed in free-range pens open to the sun. We practice a more traditional manner of feeding livestock that favors a balance of grains and legumes free of growth-promoting hormones. We believe this results in a more nutritious and flavorful meat. So, Tom.
Thank you. Way back in the summer, I received a flyer about the Nobel Conference, and I got excited about it. What makes food good? I mean, that's a great question. It encompasses agriculture, culture, sustainability, economic security, the viability of rural communities and ecosystems, and more. All of this interests me. So I'm very happy to be here and grateful for the invitation. What I'd like to do is just share a few of my perspectives and experiences as a farmer in this discussion about food security locally. Specifically, I'd like to touch on local food systems because I think they hold great promise in increasing local food security. I'm excited about them and optimistic. If you read some of the opinion pages surrounding agriculture in the farm press or the daily editorial pages, you can usually recognize the 2 different camps. One is big ag, represented by very large farms and by large corporate interests of sizable power and influence. The goal here is generally volume, and increasingly the crop sector has produced for the biofuels market. And one is small ag, represented by mid to smaller sized farms and networks of like-minded individuals who pursue a model of diversification and less reliance on external inputs. The goal here is generally sustainability, and increasingly this camp has pursued niche markets. This is, of course, a simplification. Farmers large and small fall somewhere on the wide spectrum between the 2. But each has pursued the opportunities available to them and have either gotten larger in the face of ever-tightening margins or have focused on the emerging market for food produced in a certain way, something they can deliver because of their size and the way they farm. We fit into the second camp. As Lisa mentioned, we're the 5th generation to farm our 200 acres. It's organic, so this generally means a rotation of alfalfa, corn, soybeans, and grains like oats and barley. We raise pigs for a prominent niche market company and direct market to individuals in our region. We can't chase the big ag model. Size prevents that. But also, we're more philosophically attuned to the sustainable model identified with the smaller segment of agriculture. Because of these things, our farming business is more financially secure. And because of our farming practices, it's more ecologically secure. Today, there are less farmers than any time in our history. In this area, there's also less variety of crop systems on the landscape than any time in our history. I believe that more farmers and a diversification of the ag landscape are both important components to increased food security, and that it will increasingly result in food that is good. And I see the development of local food systems as important for this. The Slow Food Organization uses the term co-producer to define the food consumer who is engaged in knowing where their food comes from. It's been interesting to watch the slow but steady groundswell of support for a more localized food economy, the phenomenon that promises to make the food available to us more abundant, more varied and interesting, and more secure. Now, a very vibrant local foods economy used to exist. When my father, who is now 80 years old and still farming with us, talks to someone from the neighborhood around our farm, he may refer to the landmark of the Creamery Corner. If you didn't grow up there, you don't know what he's talking about. But there was a creamery there. During my grandparents' generation, it was the hub of a local foods economy, much more self-sufficient than most of us can imagine. This commerce and network of relationships developed out of necessity. And as much as I admire it from this vantage point, I wouldn't want to turn back the clock. But today we're seeing a resurgence of new local food systems for other reasons. Entrepreneurs are refurbishing creameries like the one that existed by my farm, and they are producing butters and cheeses that enrich us nutritionally and enrich us with the stories of their products and how they're crafted. Others are launching enterprises like CSAs and using technologies like high tunnel greenhouses and social networking tools to build full-time businesses. This is occurring in urban America as well, where new and innovative forms of urban agriculture are emerging. I challenge anyone to look at Growing Power, based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and not be impressed with its vitality and potential, not to mention its sustainability. There's incredible ferment occurring in the area of local foods production. Established food markets and distribution chains are getting involved. Colleges are seeking to source locally produced food where possible. And recent legislation in Congress, if passed, would allow schools to serve fresh and healthy food produced by local and regional farmers. Food programs and articles in the taste sections of newspapers extol the qualities and attributes of local foods that the industrial model of Big Ag finds difficult to deliver. More people are taking an interest in farming and gardening themselves. We can all be farmers in some way, and by farming, one's attitude toward food begins to change. Even the most careless home gardener will find values and satisfactions attach themselves to the homegrown tomato served at the dinner table that didn't exist there before. I think it completes a connection. It's not just a physical act. It's food with meaning rather than just a commodity. There's a demand for food with a connection to place and certain values, and small ag and local food networks, being more nimble and perhaps less locked in or highly leveraged than its industrial scale counterpart, are in a position to deliver. Just what form these local food systems take is hard to say, but I think the energy and momentum is there, and doors are opening. Like I said, I'm excited and optimistic. And if you don't mind, I'd like to close with a quote. I'm a big fan of Wendell Berry. He makes a lot of sense to me, and I like what he writes. And he has a comment, very nice comment from a book he wrote called The Unsettling of America. And he talks about a vision of an America populated by many small farmers, which you can focus to this area, if you like, for the sake of our talk about local food systems. Many small farmers with strong cultural ties to a place. And he wrote this in The Unsettling of America. He said, most important of all, this vision proposes an agriculture based upon intensive work, local energies, care, and long living communities. That is, to state the matter from a consumer's point of view, a dependable long-term food supply. Like I said, I appreciate being here, and thank you very much, and I look forward to see what others have to say. Thank you.
Our third speaker is Jeff Larson. Jeff is the Vice President for Merchandising and Marketing at Cisco, Minnesota, which is one of the food service companies that actually services Gus Davis's dining service. And in fact, talking with Steve Chelgren about Cisco, he recalled the days right after the tornado when we didn't sort of literally know where our next meal was coming from, and the answer was, in large part, Cisco, who was preparing food in Mankato and driving it up to Gustavus for us to eat in that building over there, or that room over there, actually. Cisco is the largest marketer and distributor of food service products in North America, with a distribution network that extends throughout the United States and Canada. It's headquartered in Houston, Texas. It serves approximately 400,000 customers, including restaurants, hotels, schools, hospitals, retirement centers, and other locations where meals are prepared away from home. In recent years, Cisco has created the Cisco Minnesota Farmers Market, a collaboration between local and sustainable growers and producers, as well as local agricultural groups. Regular marketing activities feature locally grown and produced products, including but not limited to an array of products that includes Nuto Farm potatoes from my hometown. I looked in their little brochure and I found out that Dennis West, who I went to high school with, sells potatoes to Cisco. So, Jeff.
Thank you very much. I too am very grateful for the opportunity to be here tonight and to share our perspective from the food service distribution side. I've been with Cisco, Minnesota for about 21 years. Cisco, Minnesota is located in Mounds View, Minnesota, a northern suburb of Minneapolis. One of my duties at Cisco, Minnesota is to oversee the merchandising department, which is just a slick word for purchasing. It's our job to get the product into the building that the customers want so that we can deliver it to them on time, in reasonably great condition and at a fair price. To give you an idea of the role Cisco, Minnesota plays in the overall food picture, I just want to give you a couple of bullet points as far as what we do. I think some of them you touched on already. Cisco, Minnesota is what is called a broadline food service distributor. Our function is to buy products that other companies produce, consolidate them into one warehouse, and offer them for sale to the food service community. We buy and sell about 20,000 different items every year to about 4,000 food service establishments across Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Our customers include restaurants, from family dining operations to fine dining and fast food. We sell products to nursing homes, hospitals, casinos, caterers, business dining operations, schools, colleges, and universities, like Lisa said, including this fine institution. We have 530 employees at Cisco, Minnesota, including over 150 salespeople. And every day we have about 100 trucks out on the road making deliveries to our great customers. We deliver everything from milk to produce, paper goods, supplies and equipment, chemicals, meat, poultry, and seafood. We offer canned goods, frozen foods, even Brussels sprouts, even though I don't know why anybody would want them, but they do, and for that I'm grateful. We literally sell everything from soup to nuts. But although we sell a vast array of products to a large number of customers, as I mentioned a minute ago, we buy all these products from other companies. We actively buy from over 700 different producers and manufacturers, but again, we manufacture nothing ourselves. This fact alone, given the amount of product we are providing in the Minnesota community, leads to questions about how to ensure food safety from so many different suppliers and ensuring consistent product availability. Both, I think, are the two key components to establishing a food secure Minnesota. Let's touch on food safety first. How can we be assured that every time we consume a product, it's 100% safe? No question. The answer is that you probably can't and never will. Food safety comes with regulation, monitoring, reporting, licensing, as Mitch mentioned earlier, programs like HACCP. All of these things can be considered synonymous with cost. A couple of weeks ago, I was on my way from Minneapolis across the state of Wisconsin to watch my favorite pro football team's home opener, and I couldn't help, that's for you, Dave, and I couldn't help notice all the signs for various small producers of products all along Highway 29. Bob's Organic Produce, Olson's Eggs, and of course, being Wisconsin, numerous cheese producers. I couldn't help thinking about, how do people know that these producers are selling safe, wholesome products? What sort of safeguards are in place to ensure that these products are okay to consume, let alone the bigger companies like Kraft and Hormel and people like that? How do we know? What about products I buy at the grocery store or get served at a restaurant? What about all the products in our food supply? I personally kind of want to see some sort of seal of approval, something to let me know that everything's okay. But to get that level of food security, I think we need some sort of third party telling us that the product is safe. Someone to tell us that the producer is following good manufacturing practices and has safeguards to ensure the products they are using in production are wholesome. Someone to watch over finished goods and ensure those products pass rigorous food safety testing. Is this level of security practical and achievable? In many cases it is, but it comes at a cost. Third-party audits, QA inspectors, and testing are not cheap and add to the cost of the product. Costs that can be absorbed easily and spread out among a large producer's finished goods, but it becomes extremely burdensome for the small producer, making them uncompetitive. Without some sort of cooperative effort or perhaps some government financial assistance, achieving certifiably safe production is very cost prohibitive for those smaller producers. A cooperative effort could include a small number of producers pooling their resources and joining efforts to employ third-party auditors and inspectors to keep watch on production. Another option is to involve local or state government into the process, and I hate to say it, but have the taxpayers subsidize the testing for the smaller producers. Grant money is also an option at times. Any way you cut it, having a consistently safe food supply comes at a price. So what's the current state of affairs in regards to food safety from a food service distributor like Cisco? I mentioned earlier that Cisco, Minnesota buys from around 700 suppliers. Some of these suppliers are big, like Hormel or Ecolab or Tyson. Some of these suppliers that we buy from are very small, like Anderson Maple Syrup, Eichton's Cheese, or Vine Valley Farms. The larger companies have extensive QA departments and test every batch of production and are continually being inspected by third-party firms. The smaller suppliers, again, are faced with a cost they can't handle, yet these products are a very important part of our product mix. It's what our customers want, and that's what we sell at Cisco, what our customers want. If some companies, just because of their financial resources, are safer than others, how do we deal with that disparity? As of today, we don't. We deal with it by covering our backsides if there is a problem. This comes in the form of product liability insurance. In this age of recalls and lawsuits, product liability insurance is essential for any producer, big or small. Again, the costs involved with providing this insurance are high, and again, work against a small local producer. Imagine the amount of coverage you need if your product is used widely throughout the food service community. One problem can affect hundreds, if not thousands, of people that actually consume the product. Several years ago, you might remember the widespread spinach recall from one grower in California. That recall affected over 1,500 Cisco, Minnesota customers alone. 1,500 customers. Now multiply that times all the customers that those people serve that product to, and then multiply that times the hundreds of distributors across the country. The numbers are staggering, and the cost to protect that one individual farmer, that grower, is staggering. This expense will only continue to increase. Smaller local suppliers will continue to feel the pinch and will ultimately drive producers out of business and keep new producers from entering the game. But again, a cooperative effort among suppliers and our assistance from some outside agency or the government will go a long way in keeping the smaller local producers properly insured and ultimately keeping them in business. The risk has to be shared. So now that we have a reasonably safe product, the other issue is ensuring product availability. Scale again comes into play with the larger suppliers, well equipped to warehouse and distribute their products just from their sheer volume. But the smaller producers provide much needed local product, artisan creations, and culturally significant products. You're not going to find craft foods selling lefse, and you're not going to find free and or seafood selling lutefisk. So how does the smaller local producer get their product to the end user? Delivering case by case to restaurants or supermarkets is expensive. A more efficient option is to go through a distributor like Cisco, Minnesota, who can reduce the expense by delivering the product with dozens of other cases at the same time. So then the next question is, well, how do you get, say, 15 cases from an artisan cheese producer in southern Minnesota to Cisco, Minnesota? Between the time, fuel, truck cost, and the cost per case would be probably more than the product itself. Here is where we all need to work together. There are several things that can be done to ensure products get to market at a competitive price. Products can be pooled together with other producers at a central warehouse and distributed to customers and distributors in higher volumes, spreading the cost over more and more cases, lowering the per case cost, making the product more economical. As I mentioned before, Cisco has 100 trucks on the road delivering all over the state every day. When they're done, they usually come back to our warehouse empty. What we've done is we make sure that we end our route at that producer. So when the truck is empty, all we spend is the driver's time to run over there, pick up the product, and bring it back. So we can handle 15 cases from a faraway distance. So to recap, in order to provide a food-secure Minnesota, I see a continued focus on testing, inspection, and regulation to ensure products are safe. To ensure we keep local small producers in business in this litigious society of ours, we may need to help them financially with both testing, regulation necessary, and the product liability insurance required to protect them should something happen. And finally, to ensure availability, we all need to work together to solve problems and any logistical issues. Where there's a will, there's a way. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And our final presenter this evening is Margot O'Brien. Margot has been the manager of the St. Peter Food Co-op for much of its existence, and that is more than 30 years now. A cooperative, I think this is an important definition. A cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise, or as the co-op's motto used to be, the only grocery store you'll ever own. Cooperatives are based on the value of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. Margot has been the rudder and the keel for this co-op for most of those 30 years, and she's currently steering it toward a very exciting new project, a new store, which will be open probably by February if all goes well. So, Margot.
I'm very humbled to be at this conference, and I have to admit that my energies have been going in 10 different ways, and I'm in awe of this panel who have come so very prepared, and here's my piece of paper. So, but I figured after working in this industry for 40 years, if I couldn't speak to you from my heart, it wasn't worth putting it on a piece of paper. So, you know, if I'm a little rambling, please put up with me, but I do have something to say. I find that this panel kind of consolidates in a certain way the story of what happens in southern Minnesota in terms of the topic of food and food safety. We have sitting at this table generations of our community, of people in our community that have lived here as farmers. We have people that have been supplying, you know, our businesses with our product. And, you know, to be able to have a dialogue about this subject, even though we may not always agree about it, you know, this is what makes, I feel, the St. Peter Food Co-op a success in an unlikely place to succeed. This is our community represented by these people. And everyone has a viewpoint, and everyone has something to contribute to the table. If we cannot, as a community, deal with these terribly diverse issues when it comes to food, because let's face it, food is one of the most intimate topics that we, every day as an individual, are involved in. We eat food every day. Our being, our well-being, our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our spiritual well-being, our community, everything starts with sitting down at a table and eating food. Now, you can have judgments about whether it's the right food, if it's the wrong food, if it's been produced properly, if it hasn't been produced properly, if it has too much fat, has too much salt, it has all these things. But you can see what happens with food. It attracts it attracts everything in life. It attracts politics, it attracts economy, it attracts psychology, it attracts physical health, it attracts sustainability, it attracts our water, our planet, our earth, our air. This little thing that we participate every day, 3 times a day, 10 times a day, 1 time a day, it doesn't matter. This topic is something that is personal to every single one of us. And to come up with a concept of what is safe is extremely difficult because everyone has a different understanding of what that is. Some people can say technology will save us, and nobody should rule that out. But technology has to be put in a context of being responsible to all of those elements that I just talked about. You have to be respectful of this thing that we call food, this essence of our being. And there is no one right way to do it. To be safe is, on a certain level, an unreality. We want to live in a safe world. Our world is not safe. But you can make choices. Everyone votes with their fork every single day about those choices that you want to make. And there is not one right way to do it. Mitch creates cheese, and he creates commodity cheese, and he has his way of doing it, and you're not going to die from eating Mitch's cheese. Mitch's cheese has a place in the marketplace that is necessary. Tom creates value-added pork. This has a place in our marketplace also. Cisco, I am a client of Cisco, and so I have a relationship with this distributor. I need them to create products to put in my store. As a matter of fact, Mitch used to own the building that our store is in. So I have a connection to Mitch. I have a connection here. I have a connection to Tom. He's my neighbor. I've known Tom for a long time. Lisa knows Tom. These connections are this is the network that is going to keep us safe. When we can continue to have dialogue, when we can continue to support each other, this is what is going to create our safety net. I work in a retail situation. I represent not only the community, but I am employed by the members of our cooperative. I feel like a cooperative model is a wonderful place to keep this dialogue open. We try as best we can to make sure, like you were saying, that there's organic certification, and we know what that means, and that it has integrity. We don't sell completely organic food, but part of my job to my members in my community is to make sure that the food that I sell them has been looked at in terms of integrity. This is a give and take situation that we're in. Everything that is being discussed at this Nobel conference, seed banks, obesity, diabetes, and I will have to say, that Diet for a Small Planet, I've been doing this for 40 years. That book was a primer for my whole life's work. Be careful about what you do to the environment. Think about it. But I don't want to put judgments on people. This is not the way for us to create an alternative, safe world. Every little tiny step that somebody makes towards creating a more healthy environment counts. Every single step. So that from my perspective, when somebody walks into my store and the only thing they feel comfortable buying is a little bag of bulk cinnamon because they know it's a good deal, that's the beginning of this dialogue. This dialogue has many layers. There's education that has to be had. But people have to feel comfortable about their food choices. Making people feel guilty about what it is that they're eating is not the way to improve this situation. You have to take people from where they are and very, very softly, slowly coax them into another realm of knowing more about what the consequences are of what your food choices are. Lisa, how much time do I have?
You can take another 2.
Another 2. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't have this all written down. I didn't know how long it would take. So this is the essence of what I have done in this community of St. Peter for 30 years. This is not the mecca of organic, natural foods. It is not a fit, that you just have instant success by opening up a food co-op and saying, well, we're going to sell organic food and all this kind of stuff. You have to become part of the community, and you have to become part of the process of teaching, of learning, of being patient, of making progress, of going backwards. When I was a young woman, 40 years ago, oh my God, I moved to St. Peter. I could not buy a loaf of whole wheat bread. I could not find brown rice. All these little things that we've all learned about whole grain, whole foods and things were not available here. And I have to admit that my career at the co-op was totally selfish. I had to provide these foods for my family because I felt that it was important. But in those 40 years, we have made a great deal of progress. There was no food pyramid 40 years ago. Now there is, and that food pyramid is exactly the same thing that we were talking about 40 years ago in terms of eating a good, healthy diet. Do we have lots of progress to make? Yes, we have. Is the agricultural system made a great deal of progress? Yes, it has. No, it hasn't. But it comes down to this realization that this is a grassroots movement. If we want to make our food safe, if we want to improve our health, it happens a fork at a time, and we have to be patient and vigilant to make sure this happens, because it is not going to happen overnight. People are so associated with their food that you can't just say, you're really messed up and you need to change your diet. You have to put this in a context of why, what, how, when, and with some gentleness and some respect for all the players that are involved in creating our food. Farmers are amazing people, whether they grow things conventionally or whether they grow things organically. These are people, even in factory farms, that get dirt under their fingernails. And I have a hard time not trusting somebody that knows what it's like to have dirt under their fingernails.
Thank you.
That's it.
We have a brief time for questions, unfortunately not as long as I think we'd like, because we do have a concert that I want to encourage you to attend at 8. But there's a microphone right over here, so I'd like to invite any of you to step to the microphone and ask a question. Am I going to have to call on you? I will. Someone is approaching the microphone. Please.
I just wanted to direct a question to Davis. You talked a lot about technology and how we can use that to increase productivity, but what if the technology that we have right now turns out not to be sustainable and we can't actually use it to produce food in the future because it isn't sustainable at all?
I guess I'm not sure in what regard or how you'd find out it wasn't sustainable, but I think the investment that you make in researching technologies, improving technologies, sustainability needs to be proven before the technology is adopted. And that means environmental safety, that means human health safety, and economic safety. So I guess sustainability needs to be vetted out before the technology is adopted, in my opinion.
Could any of you address the statement that we actually do produce enough food today to feed the entire world, but that we waste so much of it that so many people go hungry? I've read from credible sources that we actually produce enough food today to feed people decades into the future. So, open question, I guess.
Any of the panelists?
I have something to say,
Marco.
believe it or not. I'm not a scientist. I don't have all of the facts and figures, but I took an airplane once from Minneapolis to St. Louis. And then I got in a car from St. Louis and I drove down to Carbondale, Illinois. And it was a low flight and the day was clear. And I know what my community looks like. It's corn and soybeans and corn and soybeans. And I got in this plane and I saw more corn and soybeans and more corn and soybeans. And I got in the car and I saw more corn and soybeans and corn and soybeans. Until I finally came home and looked at a map to say, this is an enormous amount of corn and soybeans. Now, some of that goes to feed animals. You can have the argument whether it feeds them efficiently or not. But I really do think that this idea of turning so much of it into corn fructose, all the other things that they do with these things, and I'm looking at those fields thinking, what if these were, spelt, triticale, barley, vegetables, that go directly from, directly into human consumption. I mean, this is what Diet for a Small Planet was talking about many, many years ago. So while I don't have any scientific understanding of that, my common sense, which has ruled me my whole life, unfortunately, tells me there's options out there to feed the planet with the amount of tillable land that we have now, if we would be maybe a little more circumspect and wise about our land use.
Other comments about that question? I think I've heard a statistic, something like 25% of food is actually lost to waste, either pre-production or post-production. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly an interesting question, and I think a lot of people have thought about that. If you look at the United States and you look at us as Americans and the amount of calories we consume, it'd probably be interesting to look at that and say, well, okay, what we don't need, we can move that over there. I think a lot of it is, I haven't traveled a lot, but my guess is, a lot of it is a distribution problem. I mean, we're very fortunate here, as Mitch said, in Minnesota. I mean, you look at our climate, you look at our soils. I mean, we're very fortunate. But being a farmer, it's easy to see where some of these places around the world, some of them that, were alluded to on with the slides earlier. I mean, you have a climate in drought where you just don't have food. So that, I think it is a real problem. I guess I come from it from the perspective that, I'm sure technology has a very important role to play. I think also different technologies, not necessarily in the biotech sense, but in just different varieties, different hybrids, things like that that are suited to a particular location are things that are being looked at as a possible solution too. But it's an interesting question.
I'm going to interject really quickly here. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, last spring we had on campus Dave Tillman from the University of Minnesota, and he gave a wonderful talk about something about this. So if you want to look at that, it's on our website, and you can check it out on the Nobel Conference website. Sorry, you're next.
I have a question for Mr. Davis. I've heard tell that if you have a lot of animals or chickens in a small area that you feed them antibiotics to keep them healthy, and I want to know if that's sustainable.
I have no idea if that's sustainable, and I know very little about poultry other than I like chicken. Cows, like I said, we have the veterinary center at our facility. We treat cows when they're ill, much like humans. And in fact, I would tell you, we look at cows more often than the average human. And drugs in this country, as far as dairy animals, have to be labeled as approved by dairy animals. You're inspected on that. The medicines on your facility is not approved for lactating animals. You won't be making milk very long. And we only treat cows when they're ill. Today, I can tell you we have 50 cows out of 6,200 milking in our hospital that have been treated. And we do it per the label. And we have more veterinarians, I would argue, than any other dairy in the country on our facility every day. So I think treatments of ill animals is a humane thing to do.
With the animals being in their barns all day with all these other cows, how do you think the treatment of the animals with all the other animals would affect our food?
Would affect what?
Our food.
Well, I think we have plenty of metrics to measure both the animal's health and the product's health. And in our dairies, we produce milk that's about 150,000 somatic cell count, which is about a third of the, well, actually it's about a sixth of this legal limit, so we're well in compliance. Our cows don't do very well if they aren't treated right and they aren't healthy. We make on Jersey cows about 65 pounds per head per day, which is, I think, above average. I know it's above average. And we track incidences of health. So if a cow has a fever, pneumonia, lameness, you name it, we track all those incidences very closely. And if those are indications, the biggest indicator is milk production and the health incidents, our cows are very healthy indoors. We control the ventilation. We run a 7-mile-an-hour air across the cow. In the summer, we're 15 degrees cooler in our cross-ventilated barn than it is outdoor. And we control UV light and the cow's mood to some extent with the Orion lighting system, which is a long day lighting system. So all the metrics we have tell us the cows are very healthy and happy inside. Thanks for the question.
First of all, Margot, 30 years ago, Dave Doft here.
That's what I thought.
30 years ago, when you started the co-op, I remember saying to my wife, "Yeah, I give it 6 months." So that's how much I know. But I have a question. Mitch, when you showed your silent video, you seem to put a lot of emphasis on technology solving the problem of feeding the growing population, 3.3+ billion more people in the world. And I'm wondering how the rest of the panel sees that. Do you think that technology is going to be able to do that, feed 3+ billion more people?
How will we feed the planet?
Boy, how we feed the planet, I don't know. I know it's from everything I read and, just looking at the situation, it is a very big concern. I think, as I said before, as far as, the specific question, I think technology is certainly a part of it. Other than that, I mean, of course, you look at technology, and some of the questioners mentioned this before. Sometimes, you have to be careful about it. Sometimes our ingenuity and stuff, no matter how well tested, has in it the seeds of problems later on. Some of these, I tend to look at this whole thing from being an organic farmer and whatnot. You generally invest more of your looking at things in kind of a system. And having done this for a number of years, that you realize just how complex this whole system is and how there's so many different balances and things like that. And so there's a technology there too that maybe doesn't involve things like biotechnology and things like that a lot of times are concerns for people. But I'm certainly not one to say that we have to discount it, because I think it's going to certainly have to be in the mix to solve that problem.
Jeff, did you have thoughts about that?
I was thinking that, 50 years ago, if you were to look at what we're doing today, people would be amazed at what's happening today. And I think if you look out in the future, 50 years from now, we probably will be amazed at what happens then. I don't think any of us are, except Mitch might be the closest thing to a technology expert, but I think we have to trust that technology is going to continue to grow and make strides and probably amaze us all.
I'll warn you, I think we should probably wrap it up in about 5 minutes, just so that we can make our way to the concert, but please.
I would like, if we have time, a consensus of the panel as to how we should view the developing genetic engineering as it's applied to both plants and animals. Should the public view it with suspect and skepticism? Should we welcome it, or should we absolutely reject it and resist it? What is the general opinion of the panel about the future and genetic engineering?
Great, thanks. Why don't we just go down the line on that? Who'd like to start?
Mitch.
I mean, there's a lot of, good things. It's a fine line. I have mixed feelings about genetic engineering. In a way, it's creepy. I mean, we have technologies we use in animals right now that if you tried to apply them to humans, we'd all be, disgusted. We can sex a cow. We can assure 90% chance of a female birth. You want to apply that in the human race? I don't think so. We can do things. You saw the salmon stuff that came out recently. I mean, there's a point where it scares. I think it should scare any of us. I don't, on the other hand, think that we should ignore it. I mean, genetic engineering has helped eliminate viruses in cheese vats so that we have less bad vats of cheese in the industry, which ultimately makes the product more available and cheaper. That's a good thing. Doesn't appear the DNA of that genetically modified microorganism doesn't get in there. We produce rennet. Here's a great one. Used to get rennet by killing baby calves and taking the enzyme out of their stomach. Somebody figured out how to insert that gene in a bacteria, E. coli actually, and it produces huge copious amounts of rennet, and we separate the rennet from the bug. So now the bug and the DNA aren't in the rennet, and we got a rennet that you could argue was produced a hell of a lot more humanely than it was previously. Is that a good example of genetic engineering? Probably. So I have mixed emotions depending on where you go with it. I think it's a slippery slope.
Cool, that's a good answer. Jeff?
I have to agree. Genetic engineering has done a lot of good things. A lot of us have seen the show Food Inc. and scares you to death. I think it's probably going to be a big part of the technology that we're talking about to feed the world in the future, but we got to be really careful, really careful.
Yeah, I guess I agree. As far as being careful, I think as far as the oversight on certain new products that are introduced, I guess my feeling is it needs to be more rigorous. In this whole thing, I come from the perspective of an organic producer, and of course you have a different segment of agriculture that's using a lot of genetically modified crops. And in that situation, I think it's just a matter of a lot of very large corporate power that is behind some of these things, and sometimes things get pushed through, and they're not always good. You release some of these things into the environment. One of the things now is genetically modified alfalfas, and just because of the nature of alfalfa and pollinator insects, once you do that, how do you keep the rest of the seed germplasm from not being contaminated? As an organic producer, we have to take the precautions to buffer our crops against the GMO crops, because they will cross-contaminate, so we always have to have buffers. So we're protecting ourselves from that already. We have to take those steps, and I get the feeling sometimes like it just keeps getting pushed, and that maybe a certain additional reserve in adopting some of these needs to be taken. But it's a phenomenal technology. It's no question about it.
I would say from a person that is a retailer with connections with the consumer, and not being a total scientist, the one thing that I do think is really important that I know that a lot of these larger corporations do not want to do is that I think that every consumer has a right to know whether that product they're buying has been altered in any way, shape, or form. And I think that that is really important, no matter what side you take. I have a right to know what you've done to my food.
On that note, I'm really sorry to do this. I'm betting the panelists would probably be willing to hang around and answer your questions on a more informal basis, but we do need to move things along, I'm afraid, and close this session. And I do encourage you to go to the chapel where the concert will take place at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much for being here tonight, and thanks to all of our panelists.